achieved. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and this is a post-fight show, but I use that term incredibly loosely, as in order to have a post-fight show, you have to have a fight, and UFC 151 has not taken place yet and will not be taking place, but I felt the need to jump on here and talk about, get my 2 cents in as it seems like everyone else is talking about it, as we are in the eye of the shitstorm. This is a cluster of epic proportions. Pardon my French. Hopefully they beep that out. But basically looking at things, UFC 151 has been canceled. Dan Henderson hurt. Jon Jones pulls out. Let's do a rundown of how this affects and who this affects. Jon Jones currently being blamed for UFC 151's cancellation, and Dana White is pissed. The man is livid. The big boss incredibly upset. Dan Henderson attempted to take this fight on one leg, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Greg Jackson, Jon Jones' coach, is doing as much damage control as he possibly can do to try and make things, fix things and explain why things went down the way they did. Before we get to Lyoto Machida, Chael Sonnen nearly talked himself into a title fight after Dana White explicitly said he will not talk himself into a title fight. There's no way he'll get a shot at this stage, and he nearly got the fight on the basis of his words, his personality, and who he is on short notice. Lyoto Machida, MIA, where have you gone? Originally handed the fight and the shot at UFC 152 and now backs out of the fight. Now, of all people, Vitor the Phenom Belfort will be getting the shot at 152 in the main event if he remains injury-free, heading to the September 22nd Toronto card. Michael Bisping, he made an excellent point. He tweeted simply that he took a fight with Chael Sonnen in 8 days' notice. Why not Jon Jones? Why not the champion? One group of people I feel really bad for in this whole scenario is the rest of the card, especially some of the lesser-known fighters who are, maybe not losing a fight date, as a lot of them are being pushed off and being rescheduled as we speak, but still they've lost the opportunity to compete, and at least in the near future, and they have to wait another month. And finally, if there's one bright light at the end of the tunnel here, UFC 152 in Toronto has gained a main event, a title fight. We'll now have 2 title fights on the card, and that's the type of event we expect from the UFC. But either way, I'm going to look at things, break things down, and let's get to it right now. Alright, so let's look at the man at the center of this hurricane of harassment. Jon Bones Jones, the UFC light heavyweight champion, is taking it from all sides at this point, and basically what happened was, we talked about it, Dan Henderson got himself hurt, had to pull out of the fight. Jon Jones, left without an opponent, was offered Chael Sonnen in an attempt to save the event. Chael Sonnen, basically former middleweight challenger, now moving up to lightweight, supposed to fight Forrest Griffin in the future, had been jawing back and forth at Johnny Bones Jones. I wonder if he hadn't got the word potentially about what was going on with Dan Henderson, hadn't beefed up his arguments and conflict with the champ in order to build some momentum heading into this. He's offered the fight. He even offers Jon Jones his purse to show, Chael Sonnen offers his own purse for Jones to show up. Jones says, no thank you, I'm not taking the fight, and the event gets canceled. Everyone is pointing their fingers. They're pointing whatever appendage they can get at Jon Jones, saying it's this guy's fault. And yes, it is Jon Jones' fault, but not to the extent everyone's giving it, to him. And I'm sure I'm going to catch some flack for this. But when it comes right down to it, there are more parties at blame than just the light heavyweight champion. And I'm going to look at Jon Jones first, because he is the champ. He is the face of the UFC, along with guys like Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, Junior Dos Santos. These guys are the champions. They're the ones the UFC is building their name around. And it's easy to blame him. But I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, and please, by all means, voice your opinion, but do it in an educated, intellectually based, intelligent manner when you post your comments on my video as to your disagreements. Don't be like, you're stupid. Please don't do that, because you just sound like an idiot. But Jon Jones, should he have taken this fight? I don't think he should have. He's the champion. He's beaten pretty much everyone there is to beat as past champions. Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, Shogun Rua. He's put these guys away. He put away Ryan Bader. It's not just beat them. Other than Rashad Evans, he decimated these fighters and did it in impressive fashion. And then Dan Henderson, his next obstacle he's been training for, pulls out, and the UFC says, 8 days notice, here, fight Chael Sonnen. That's a tough road to hoe, especially when you consider, like everybody keeps talking about, and Greg Jackson's doing a good job of voicing this, and people need to understand this, it's not 8 days notice. Yes, he has 8 days to prepare or prior to the event, but he only has a couple of days to prepare before he gets ready for fight week, which is press conferences, weight cutting, and the final stages of preparation, not game planning, not skill development to deal with Chael Sonnen. Because as much as Chael Sonnen and Dan Henderson are both wrestling-based opponents, they are vastly different fighters. And I think Jones would have handled Chael easily, but actually, I want to see Chael and Jones fight. I want to see when they both had full training camps preparing for each other, and I'm glad this fight didn't get ruined as a result. And Jones, he is the champion. And it's not like he's a champion who's had one win and look at me. Like I said, he's beaten the best of the best of the best. And as a result, I think he has a little bit of, he does have an obligation to defend the title. And he has an obligation to be a good ambassador for the sport. But at the same time, he is not required to put his career on the line simply because of a situation that happened to his opponent. So if I had to say, what percentage blame lies on the champion's shoulders, I would say 35% blame for this situation lies on his shoulders, which leaves a huge chunk of the blame still lying out there, and I'm going to talk about next who I think the next chunk of blame should be thrown on. Let's talk about the challenger, Dan Henderson. I give him full props in one sense for trying to stick this out. The guy's 40 years old. He probably recognizes he may never ever get a shot at the title again. We've seen challengers far younger pull out of a title fight with an injury and then never ever get a chance to climb the mountain in that and get back up there. So I know where Dan Henderson's coming from, wanting to stick it out. But it's been brought to light now. 3 weeks ago, he knew he'd hurt. 3 weeks ago is when he hurt himself, and he knew it was bad and tried to train through it. He's never pulled out of a fight before, so again, I give him 100%, props for attempting to gut it out. But at the same time, had he come to the UFC 3 weeks ago and said, "I've been injured, I don't know what the scenario is. I don't know if I'll be able to fight or not. Let's get it looked at. Let's get it evaluated," that would have given the UFC over a month to rebuild a main event, get a title challenger set up. Maybe Machida in a month will take the fight with Jon Jones, and things would have been set up okay. Again, he had a month now, and he didn't need to turn the fight down again. We'll talk about Machida in a second. But either way, Dan Henderson, I put 5% of the blame of the situation on Dan Henderson simply because the time frame was constrained based on him trying to get it out. And again, I know where he's coming from, and I struggled actually to put blame on him, but a little bit gets thrown his way simply because had he come forward initially and said, "Look, something's up, I'm hurt, things are bad, I'm probably not going to be able to fight this fight because this is Jon Jones, and a lot of very young and able two-legged men couldn't beat him. How's a 40-year-old one-legged man going to beat him?" Take nothing away from Dan Henderson, the guy's a beast. But either way, I wish he would have come forward earlier, and maybe this event could have been saved. Now, so 35 on Jones, 5 on Henderson. That's 40% for you math technicians out there. Yeah, math technicians, that's right. 60% still lies on the table. Let's talk about that now. 60%, you're probably guessing who's getting it. It's Dana White and the UFC executives, the decision makers, because as far as I'm concerned, they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. What this event boiled down to was you have a main event, fantastic looking main event, and an okay card. I like all MMA fights as far as I'm concerned, but when it comes right down to it, this event was not that deep. Even when the original co-main event was Josh Koscheck versus Jake Ellenberger, both guys coming off losses, both in the middle of the pack right now in the welterweight title fight. That's not a very strong co-main event. Take out Koscheck, sub in Jay Haran, who's coming back to the UFC, and things are not looking that good. You got Thiago Tavares facing Dennis Hallman, Dennis Seaver against Eddie Yagman, which would have been a barn burner of a fight, and hopefully will still happen. John Lineker versus Yasuhiro Urushanti. Those two are going to go out in the flyweight division. As much as I'd like, I was looking forward to this event, it lacked the depth, and I put the blame on Dana White and company here for trying to sneak one by us and getting caught. They knew this event was riding solely on the main event, and that's what they've been trying to do of late. Spread more events, still charge full price, water things down, put a big headlining card up, at the top, and hopefully the rest of the fights will pull through with some decent talent. You need to stop doing that, Dana White. And UFC 152 is a perfect example now of what a card should look like. You have a very, very good main event matchup now with Vitor Belfort versus Jon Jones. At least on paper, we'll see how it plays out if Belfort does actually show up for the fight, doesn't get injured. Co-main event's a title fight, Benavidez versus Johnson, good matchup. Then you got Brian Stann versus Michael Bisping. That's an excellent fight. That could be a main event on most cards, at least a co-main event. And those are the 3 fights it's built upon. That's a solid 3-fight combination for the main card. And I don't want to get into the rest of it, but either way, that's what UFC events should look like. Not this garbage where you've got one really strong fight, one okay fight, and then a bunch of fights that are basically prelim quality or, just barely good enough to be on the main card. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, every event should be in a scenario where it's like, if the main event gets tweaked, someone pulls out, either one of two things can happen. We can sub someone in of lesser caliber into the main event, still be good because the rest of the card is solid. Or we can move, like they've done so many times in the past, we can move the co-main event up into the main event position and keep things right on rolling. But this time they could not. They got caught. I think Dana White's anger was should be directed just as much as himself for the scenario they put themselves in by setting a card up like this. I was looking forward to the card. I was breaking the fights down as, leading up to this announcement. But I think what comes down to it is 60% of the blame should be lumped on Dana and the UFC for attempting to put a card together like this. They got caught. It could have been a fantastic card for all we know with some great talent, and there's some very good fighters on it. But as we just found out, why would the UFC cancel an event if it was good enough to continue on with one fighter being removed, technically one fight coming off the board with Jones not accepting a fight with anyone else? Either way, I think what they should have done is they should have set it up, okay, we're going to keep it the way it is. Jones, the main event's off. Let's put her on and Ellenberger in the main event. Let's sell this pay-per-view for $5.99 on, as a pay-per-view. We'll make it cheap, kind of give something back to the fans, and hopefully they will come along and buy it. Definitely want to, keep it going. But now UFC 151 is going to be called the Lost Card, a card that no longer exists, and that's going to be a black mark on the organization's face, simply because instead of taking 152, making it 151, and let's keep things rolling, now we're going to have 151 on people's Blu-ray and DVD shelves and collections is not going to exist, and we're going to keep rolling with 152. Either way, shame on you, UFC. Shame on you, Dana White. I really think you messed up. You created the problem, and hopefully the beneficiary of this mistake is the fans going forward, because we will get a chance to see better cards, because they will be definitely concerned about having this happen again. If this happens again, if we are, forced to deal with the fact that another card gets canceled because one fight comes off the board, serious questions have to be raised. I hope they're smart enough not to put themselves in this position. Put a strong main card together, put a good co-main event up there, and make things, give yourself some insurance as to not wind up screwing the pooch in an event. One fighter or one fight has to be scrapped, and that's what happened here. And I think that's where the blame should be. That's who these guys should be pointing their finger at. It's easy to say Jon Jones is the culprit, but as far as I'm concerned, I think the fighters in the card, should be pointing their fingers at Dana White and the company, saying, "What went on here? What happened here? Why are you canceling the fight? What are you trying to tell us? We're not good enough fighters? If that's the case, why didn't you put the card together a little bit better than you actually did?" Either way, that's my rant. I'm going to move on to talk about a couple more odds and ends before we shut this thing down. So finally, let's talk about a couple of the other characters involved in this circumstance. Lyoto the Dragon Machida. Originally, I saw a poster printed. Lyoto Machida, Jon Jones for the title, main event in UFC 152. And then all of a sudden, Machida says, "No, I'm not comfortable fighting Jones." Apparently, he said I would have fight him at 153, but 152 just a little bit too soon. You know what? I think Machida, this could come back to bite him in the backside, simply because we'd already heard all the talk that Jones was not interested in fighting him. Here was his opportunity where Jones basically, lesser of two evils, saying, "I won't fight at 151, but I'll fight Machida at 152. Maybe Machida doesn't get a title shot at this point. You never know what the scenario is going to be. But either way, I like Lyoto. He came off a dominating performance against Ryan Bader. A month to train when you've just fought not that long ago should have been enough, I think, to get him in this situation. But either way, this could be his last opportunity at the title. So again, I see his side of things too, and why he didn't take the fight. Kudos to Vitor Belfort for stepping up and taking the opportunity. A middleweight, former light heavyweight fighter, standing in there. He has been posted as one of the biggest underdogs in the history of the UFC against Jon Jones. And I wonder how this fight's going to go. I can't see how, unless Belfort's able to blitz him and put hands on Jones's fists, fists on Jones's chin. How this fight's not going to wind up with Belfort gassing and Jones stopping him either TKO or submission, because I just think Vitor is a prime candidate to be shut down by the long, gangly, powerful limbs of the champion. Chael Sonnen, love him, hate him, whatever. The guy's there. He is he's a warrior for the sport, for the UFC. Of course, he's in it for himself and the payday, but he would have taken that fight on 8 days' notice. Not too many people lining up to fight Chael Sonnen on 8 days' notice. The great Lyoto Machida wouldn't take it on a month's notice, and Chael would have taken it on 8. Either way, good for him, and I hope he beats Forrest Griffin, and I hope he gets himself a title shot in the near future. That certainly adds some very interesting an interesting scenario into the division, because I think that fight is going to happen in the not-so-distant future. Greg Jackson, Dana White called him a sport killer. God, Greg Jackson's taking a rough... has a rough go of things right now for some of his fighters. His Strikeforce event, his fighters went 1-3 at the last event. He's being called some things, some game planning. He's looking at the Clay Guida and Carlos Condit fights, definitely being accused of some boring game plans there. And now this. Greg Jackson just doesn't seem like he can do anything right now. And if I'm Jackson, I might want to step away from the microphone and do your best to maybe pull yourself back a little bit and do some damage control by really not doing too much of anything at all. Anderson Silva, of all people, was a fighter who stepped up and apparently called Dana White right after he announced the cancellation and said, "I'll fight UFC 151. I'll fight in the light heavyweight division, not against Jon Jones specifically, but I'll fight in the main event and try and save the event." Too late. I don't know if that's just a political or a move on his part to be like, "I'll do it. Oh, it's already canceled. Oh, I didn't know that before I called." But either way, thanks Anderson Silva for attempting to save things. That would have been very interesting. And if you think Anderson Silva and Jon Jones are going to fight with only 8 days' notice, you're absolutely, kidding yourself. The UFC would never do that, ever, because they know what money's at stake and they know what they can do with that fight like that, so they're not going to put together that short a notice. Who else I want to talk about? Fighters out of work, or at least it seems like most of those fights are going to be put off on the next couple events, which again will help to fill out those events and make things a little more interesting, make things a little, thicken things up a little bit. And I like that, and that's good. I hope no one actually loses their fight as a result of this. And I know some guys were upset and were targeting Jon Jones for for him pulling out and costing them fights. I hope, I think this is going to create some bad feelings, but either way, I really hope these guys do. Make the money that's owed to them. I'm sure I think the UFC should step up, recognize how they're at fault in this situation, and maybe put something up, or at least for the next events that these guys fight in, put a little more cash on the table for the guys that were supposed to fight at UFC 151, and we're screwed over by the collective in this situation. So that's just about enough for me. I want to wrap things up. The NFL season, 2012 NFL season, is on the horizon. For those of you who've been following me for a while, I think when I first started doing Kamikaze Overdrive, it was a two-pronged attack. We did MMA predictions and we did NFL predictions. We had two shows. The NFL, I had a pretty good following for just starting out. They were entertaining. My predictions were not bad, not great. I had good weeks, I had bad weeks. Well, it's coming back. It's not actually going to be me predicting. I might do some predictions, but I'm putting together an NFL website that'll be attached to my MMA website. You have to check it out. I've got a guy who's really, I don't want to give too much away, but he's very high up on the NFL predicting ladder, and he's going to do a good job. Put some betting packs together, very similar to our MMA betting packs. They all involve game-by-game breakdowns with both point spread and money line. We're going to talk about confidence lists, value lists, over/under. We're going to put some parlays together. They'll be available for week number 1, so please check that out. And also, if you've been over to my website, you will also notice I'm starting to do some prizes for my NFL or for my MMA bet packs. I had some stuff lined up for UFC 151. Fear the Fighter UFC 151 walkout shirt was going to be up for grabs, and also a heartandglory.com customized shirt was going to be available for one each. Buy my bet pack, your name goes to a draw. I draw your name out, you get a shirt shipped to you for free. So a couple people have been winning there. It'll be up for grabs 152. And again, if you have a Sports Interaction betting account, you definitely want to buy my bet packs, because there'll be an opportunity for you to win some actual cash through the bet packs with Sports Interaction by predicting fight of the night, submission of the night, knockout of the night. But again, keep your eyes open for more details. You can see them over at kamikazeoverdrive.net. This has been an exhausting 24 hours, all the movement and things going on. Hopefully we've seen the last. Hopefully we can settle back down and get back into a groove of things. We've got a month layoff between before the next UFC event. As I'm talking right now, Bellator 73 is getting ready to get going. I'm looking forward to that card. Either way, as always, thank you very much for tuning in. Please let me voice your opinions. Please you voice your opinions, and thank you for listening to my opinion. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions. I'll see you back here for UFC 152.